So, without further ado, I want to again thank everyone for joining us this Thursday. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Christian Arno, who is the founder of Pawprint.
Hello, folks. Nice to meet you. As well.
So, Christian, where are you joining us from?
I'm in Edinburgh. So yeah, just north of the border. Only 3 hours by train away.
Beautiful Edinburgh, one of my favourite places in the UK. So, what we wanted to do is effectively on this event, we have lots of amazing people who come to our events who want to be entrepreneurs and want to create startups. And you're on this incredible journey right now with Pawprint. And you have literally launched this product and gone on this amazing journey. So before we kind of talk about Pawprint, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about you. So for those who kind of turned up a bit early and we were kind of guessing away, your background's in linguistics, is it right?
Yeah. The one thing I could do well at school was languages, and so did French and Italian at uni, and then set up an online translation business, which I ran for 18 years. So yeah.
And so when you set up the translation business, was it sort of a unique thing that obviously people had kind of places they could go to, but it wasn't available online?
That's right. Yeah. So it was probably one of the first .coms for translation. And the idea was to use basic internet technology, uploading documents, paying for things online, things that we take for absolute granted now, but at those in those days were unusual in the translation space. So yeah, the business has done quite well. It's called Lingo24. It's still going strong. Customers like eBay, Patagonia, people like that. So yeah.
And so you've got this incredibly successful translation business. And then what happens? Where does the idea come from?
For Pawprint? Yeah, so I guess I enjoyed running a translation business. It gave me a lot of experience and met people from all around the world. But I guess I always felt like there was something missing. I felt like I could run a translation business that was 5% better than the next person's, or, I could make money out of it. But would that really be what I wanted to put on my gravestone type thing? And I sort of got an interesting relationship with like capitalism and how it doesn't help everybody. And I guess I wanted to do something that had more purpose to it, that took on some of the world's big problems. And it was really a conversation with my dad that made me sit up and take notice. Because the climate, we'd always been pretty eco as a family, Prius drivers and taking the train and things like that. But I don't think I'd realised that it was something that I really wanted to work on and put heart and soul into, and that I could find a way to do that as well. Because historically, people working on this sort of thing have tended to do that, in government organisations or charities and things like that. Yeah, a few things came together to make me think that this was the right thing to do, and that I really wanted to go for it.
So with Pawprint, was it more that it was less about the product at that point, but it was more about just having a bit of a sliding doors moment and going, no, I actually want to work on something which has a bit more, meaning, in the sense of that it could genuinely make a real difference? Yeah,
absolutely. It was that seeing suffering that some people have as a result of climate change already, and thinking forward, as we've discussed, I've got young kids as you do, and thinking about the future that they're going to have. I almost couldn't not do this, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think it's the same thing with me when I founded Empowering Women with Tech. I had worked in the tech industry for God knows how many years, and never felt sort of any different for being the only female in the room. And it was only when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and then I started to look around and go, I was one of like 3 females in a department of like 300. And I was like, right, okay, maybe there is a problem here, and I'm going to try and address it. And so I founded this wonderful thing. But going back to Pawprint, so it's really fascinating. So you effectively wanted to make a difference, but at that point you didn't have a product yet. You were kind of effectively going, right, okay, what can I do? So in that situation, what did you do? Where did you decide to kind of look at finding that sort of gap where you could make a difference?
Yeah, so I started off just having conversations with people I knew. We would get together, I'd bring business friends and friends together, get some sandwiches in and just have a chat about what the concept could be. I think the breakthrough moment was probably when I invited Sarah Ronald to come along. So Sarah, as you know, runs a service design agency here in Edinburgh called Nile HQ. And she came along to a couple of those early meetings, and then she brought a couple of her team along, and they could see how this could be turned into a product. And they have the sort of frameworks for managing that process from idea to something that is investable. And so she effectively led the incubation of this product, and is a shareholder and is on our Bjorn board, and has helped us turn what was sort of pub chat into something that's now got real momentum behind it. And
so we're going back to the idea. So Pawprint, that you effectively decided to go into carbon footprint. And so do you want to tell us a little bit about what Pawprint was then and what it has kind of evolved to?
Yeah, so how has it evolved from then? I think it's worth talking about a couple of other inspirations around this. So one was my dad sitting me down and having his sugar lumps moment. You got to do something about climate change type thing. Another was two former colleagues of mine from Lingo setting up Edinburgh's first zero waste supermarket, and me thinking, massive kudos to them for turning their passion and their beliefs into a business. And then the other thing that happened was a friend came to me with this business idea that involved looking at how your investments had improved over the last year. And, if your investments in Tash had improved by 20% and mine only by 2%, I might want to track what you were doing with your permission and learn from you. And so that idea of getting a number that I think numbers are really useful because they give you something to work on and they can quantify impact, which I think was a lot of the frustration that I had as an individual. I'm putting a load of effort into doing all this recycling and trying to reduce plastic usage, but I don't really know if that's the right way for me to be putting my time and effort. And I'm sure there are other people like that want to have a trusted source of information on what I can do, what I should do, what I can do as an individual, within my family, communities, business, etc. So that was the core of it. Those three influences, and the numbers one probably has had most impact on the approach that we've taken. So.
And that's the key thing, really, is that what you kind of seized on is having something which is quantifiable or measurable. It's so funny, in my day job, we're doing a lot of work around performance, and we're wanting to kind of speed up, some pages on our websites. But the key thing is about having a benchmark and understanding at what point you're at now, so that you can kind of understand, like you say, in which directions to look at improving site speed. But, so I can see actually that my endeavours have made a difference of taking an 1/8 of a second off here, or making the pages slightly lighter, or what have you. And I guess that's the same thing with data, is as long as you've got data and metrics, then you can kind of have a sense of satisfaction that what you're doing is making a difference, right?
Exactly right. Would it be useful for me to show you some of the screens that we're putting together so that people get a sense?
That'd be brilliant.
To visualize it. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this whole presentation, but there are some bits in here that I think might be useful. I will talk about because you use the word empower, and I love that as a word. That is such a motivating word to use, and our mission is about empowering people to fight climate change, people from all walks of life, because that is the sort of the gap. I think if we did research on this, the vast majority of people recognize that climate change is a massive problem, want to do their bit, but they just don't know where to turn. There isn't a trusted source without going to the nth degree. And there are many governmental organizations and brands trying to feed us information that we can't fully trust, I would say, on this topic, because they probably have other things on their mind. And the vision is to build this community-driven standard for how that works, the measurement, understanding and reduction, because I think it's much better if we can have that guided by a community of people rather than sort of enforced on us by others. So in terms of, how it looks, because this is the bit that we were referring to, Natasha. The screen that you can see on the right here is what somebody's paw print looks like. And and this is expressed in carbon dioxide equivalent, which is a measure for, it's not the perfect number, but it's the best number to get a steer on what has most impact. So it caters to not just carbon dioxide, but also other greenhouse gases such as methane, other things that are impactful. And you'll see below that we express it also in miles driven, traveled by car, which is something that is probably more readily understood. And then the numbers in the toes above are the big buckets that apply to us all as consumers. So our diet, food and drink, what happens in our home, how we heat it, how we insulate it, all that sort of stuff. Travel, obviously less relevant at the moment, but usually quite a big one. And then other, which covers like technology and products and toys and all that sort of stuff that we all enjoy.
And so effectively what you're doing is almost like a questionnaire of gaining that information and kind of using kind of infographics to display what that is, and then giving you recommendations, I guess, on what to do in these specific areas if you want to take the number down further.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So this is the 3 components of the product that we're going to be launching later this month. I can't quite believe it. Are the sort of the Pawprint calculator. So how you get this number, where do you fit, and you can see what a question looks like. The next bit is around the challenges. So I mean, what we're building here is a behavioural change platform. There's a lot of emphasis on offsetting. But as Mike Berners-Lee says, offsetting is part of the puzzle, but it can sometimes lull people into a false sense of security that, if you offset that flight, then it's fine to fly 20 times a year, which, it's hard to justify when you look at the numbers. And then the third bit is this concept that I mentioned to you before, paw points. So that is how we reward folk for, taking on the challenges, spreading the word, and then they can use those paw points sort of supermarket style initially to vote for causes that they believe in. So it might be Zero Waste Leeds, or it might be the Yorkshire Woodland Trust, or it might be Friends of the Earth, who knows, but that you can actually not just change things personally and do things that are good for the long term, but help people within your local community who are doing climate friendly stuff today.
You've got that lovely kind of sense of gamification as well of, and can you kind of level up as well of kind of understanding kind of on that journey how you are at doing?
Yeah. So if you look at the left-hand side screen here, you can see Bjorn popping up again. I hope people like Bjorn. Some people worry that he's a bit sort of for a younger audience or something, but we're hoping to make him fun and that people can like some of the stuff he does. But the 2 numbers that you've got in the top right, one is your paw points, and the other is your actual paw print. What is your number, and that will show you graphically, as the evolution of that, and you can check that. You see the bottom left-hand square in that on that screen. You can see how your paw print evolves over time. So we're hoping to make it like the danger with this subject is that people feel judged, and so the first thing that Bjorn says is don't beat yourself up, and then the second thing he says is it's all about small things, and the third thing is it's about what's right for you, because what's right for you in Leeds versus what's right for me in Edinburgh will be different. We've got different constraints, financial, lifestyle, religious, all that sort of stuff. So what we really want here is a movement that is a broad church of folk who want to find their way of adapting to the needs of a low carbon future, but want to be respected and shown how to do that in a way that's right for them.
Just to reassure you, Christian, Nicola says she loves Bjorn, and Erin says that he seems very likable. So you've already got some great feedback so far on Bjorn. And I think what's really nice is that you've we're going into kind of some of the data recommendations, but where have the data recommendations come from? So am I right in thinking you've been working with Tim Berners-Lee on this?
Yeah, it's actually his brother, Mike Berners-Lee.
There we go. I knew it was, but yes.
It's all right. No, I mean, a lot of people obviously, Tim, I mean, I'm glad I'm not a Berners-Lee. I would have been definitely the least intelligent Berners-Lee around that dinner table.
I was going to say, you know, you're Mike, and you know, Tim's like, you know, I've invented the internet. You're like, oh, brilliant. You know, how am I going to beat that?
Yeah. Well, Mike is my hero. He's written a book called How Bad Are Bananas? And I met two young ladies from a climate action group at the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Policy for Climate Change group, and told them about the idea for Pawprint. And they said, you've got to read Mike Berners-Lee's book, because it sounds like that is you're building the app of his book. And so, yeah, we've been working together with him. He initially told me that we wouldn't meet up, but we did a video conference call, and he could tell that I wasn't going to, you know, go away quietly.
How do you get hold of a guy like Mike Berners-Lee? I mean, I'm sure he must have lots of people kind of reaching out to him. You know, is it, you know, friend of a friend, or just sheer good tenacity? I
think it's sheer tenacity. Yeah, he was doing an event in London, and I sent him a message. I think it was an email just to say, I'd love to meet you. I've got this concept that I think can be so much better with your support, and is inspired by your work. And he said, please don't, because there would have been a carbon impact to me traveling to try and see him. So he said, let's have a video conference call. And after that, he said, yeah, it'd be interesting to meet. And we've gradually built up trust between the two organizations. He's in our crowdfunding video. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet. Have you?
It's great. It's really good. And I think we're going to kind of touch on the Crowdcube stuff, because I think with this stuff, it's all about authenticity and personality, but also credibility. And I think that kind of really comes across, right?
Yeah. So Mike, it was there was a very funny moment during the filming where we were talking generally about him and what his business does and his books and all that sort of stuff. And then at a certain point, I asked him, "Now, so Mike, what is it you like about Pawprint?" And there was just this massive gap where he couldn't. He was like, "Now, what can I say at this point?" But he got into it, and he's seen us grow. He's seen the team grow. He's seen us raise some money, and he knows that we're serious about this and intent on having being trusted. Like the moment that we start doing things that are going to compromise trust, we'll lose. So that's a tricky balance. Will be a tricky challenge, I think. But no, it's a good relationship, and long may it last.
Nicola asks, if your Pawprint is already very low, do you get Paw points for keeping it low?
Oh, that's a great question. So the system for getting Paw points is pretty rudimentary to start with. But I think that you'll also be able to get Paw points for other things you might do. For example, if you've got a really low Pawprint, and you can then share with us the type of things that you do that you think maybe others don't do, we would reward you with Paw points for that. Other things, like as we try to launch in Leeds, we're going to need people who can help us with local content. So where are the low carbon products, services and activities that we need to be bringing to everyone in Leeds to accelerate this transition? What are the deals that we need to do with local businesses that will make it more lower cost and more convenient for people to go lower carbon? So there will be other things we do. That, to your point, to answer it directly, I don't think we've built that in, but we should do, shouldn't we? Like that's, for people maintaining it, they should be recognised.
So Nicola, when that one day gets put in, it's going to be chucked into the backlog with Christian after this meeting.
Yeah.
That was my contribution.
Yeah, and that is what I love about what we're building here. Like we're building a movement. This is not just like a normal business. We're building a movement where anyone can be part of it as a user. I think a lot of people can become investors from £10, and the ideas that are best and most impactful will float to the surface. That's the idea. We had around the way the Pawprint works. Our initial plan was that you couldn't get you couldn't get your full Pawprint until such time as you'd filled out all 4 of the toes. But one of our investors just casually said, well, what about giving people, you're going to have some people drop off during that onboarding process. So what about just allowing people to get some of that information and to work on one bucket? And I was like, I mean, it's obvious, but it's genius at the same time. So
yeah, absolutely. And what Nicola's saying on here on the chat is the sort of people who are initially going to be interested in this, or those who maybe already are trying to keep their carbon footprint low. So you need to have something for them.
Yeah. I think the brief, I mean, some of the challenge you've got here around turning off the lights is an interesting one, because a lot of people will say, well, I know that, I'm doing it already and all that sort of stuff. But the brief to our content team in writing these challenges, and this is one reason why it's great to get people like that engaged, is to surprise and delight and enchant and come up with a new take, because that's what's going to get that engagement with people from all walks of life.
And so we've got Pete Wilkie, who asks, interesting to know whether this is done at an individual level or at a household basis, because incentivizing households to do this together might lead to more buy-in from children, may reduce arguments or dissent about turning down the heating. Oh, Pete.
We can all relate, well, many of us can relate to that sort of stuff. Yeah.
But it's an interesting one, because I mean, it's been Earth Day recently, and my daughter did some homeschooling around thinking about recycling. But answering Pete's question, is it kind of on an individual basis, or do you have a sort of a household account?
Yeah, so initially it'll be on an individual basis, but some of those things will be, so one of the initial questions is how many people live in your household, so that we can give you that. What we're going to build out later in the year is the ability to have groups of different types, whether that's your family unit, or it could be your postcode or your where you work and all that sort of stuff. And I think one of the keys, and I think it's I think Pete said this in his chat, is if we can make a lot of these challenges social. So if we can encourage, for example, lift sharing through this, or communities sharing meals, or whatever it is, we're going to lead. It's going to go bigger, and that's going to be good for us in terms of impact, in terms of us as a business, etc. So I think he's hit the nail on the head there.
And I think what's really interesting is what a lot of these questions bring up is this whole dilemma you have as a startup founder, is where the MVP is, or for people, where the minimum viable product is. Where do you draw the line? Because it's, I suppose, as a founder, you're almost like the visionary, the product owner, maybe, as you will. And how do you resist temptation to put more features in, and actually have some confidence to go, do you know what, no, this will do for launch, I'm going to just do individual accounts? Have you kind of fallen into that pitfall of kind of almost kind of putting more in, and then having to kind of restrain yourself back a bit?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that came through the user research that Sarah's company facilitated was people wanting access to local information. What, within a mile of where you live, what are the low carbon products, services and activities that you might want to consider? And that's something that we had originally in the MVP spec, but it was looking like that would extend the build time enough that we decided that couldn't go there. So I guess the way that worked was that our head of tech, who happens to be my brother-in-law, so someone I know very well and trust deeply, he basically is extremely direct about the implications of it, and the fact that, and I'm impatient to get this out. It's all very well talking about it, but until people can access it on their phones, it's not real. So it's just been quite hard-nosed on where's the value going to come from, and do we have a product that people will love and engage with, and sort of get what the core of what we're doing is, which is a lot. Yeah.
So what I was going to say is, the lovely Anna has given me a very prudent nod, especially because Anna works at the NHS. We are at 1 minute to go, so I suggest we come back in 10 past, fill your glasses, go and give our frontline workers an incredible clap outside, and we'll see you back here in actually 5 past. We'll see you back here in 5 past.
Brilliant. Thanks.
So welcome back to everyone. I hope everyone's done a big clap outside for our incredible frontline workers. I'm going to try and keep myself muted because my daughter is still banging on pans inside the house, singing to herself. So if you do hear some noise behind me, I promise it's it's not some weird experimental kraut album that my husband's put on. Yeah, so where were we? So we were talking about the amazing Pawprint, and we were talking about some of the challenges of actually getting your idea off the ground. And it's actually refreshing to hear, because normally with startups, you tend to have the founder who is just desperate to keep adding things on. But I think you're kind of pragmatic that you want to launch it. But I think also you kind of touched on the influence your brother-in-law has, that it's important to have people around you that you can trust, but also that can actually go, come on, Christian, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things, Chris is unlike other tech leaders I've come across or I've worked with, in his ability to communicate effectively, which I think is excellent. I mean, he's very direct and sometimes verging on rude, but he is, he's a communicator. And the other thing is that he is looking at, obviously he's got a tech steer on everything, but he's looking at things from a whole company lens rather than thinking just about what's good for tech and for his team type thing. So I think those two qualities are really important in tech leaders, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So Mary asks, how do you calculate the Pawprint?
How do you calculate? Okay, so the way that we do that initially is on those questions. Maybe I should go back to those questions. You will give us answers that allow us to then make some calculations in the background based on Mike Berners-Lee as to what is the carbon dioxide equivalent of all of those different things. So if we look at this question here, how many flights per year do you take? If that is, flights are, I think everybody's aware, are quite an impactful thing, and you know the length of those flights and even the class in which you fly can have quite a big impact. So what will happen with this example is that sitting beneath that, there'll be some assumptions on the average flight, and we'll then make a calculation and add that into what your number would be. So I mean, it's worth saying that these numbers are scientifically valid, but they are not, 100% precise. And there's a lot of complexity in how you calculate carbon footprint numbers. And we've taken the Mike Berners-Lee approach of saying we're doing our very best to be as accurate as possible, but accepting that what we can really offer people is directionally accurate stuff based on 3 minutes of questions to start with. And then over time, we're hoping to get more accurate and actually be able to validate the numbers that we give people by hooking into third-party data sources. So for example, in Leeds, unlike in Edinburgh, because it's different in England and Scotland, if I know your address, I can not only know what your how energy efficient your house is, but I also can know how energy efficient it could be. So if you could move from a G to a B, it's very different to if you could move from a G from an F in terms of what the challenges are we can then feed you. So we'll be looking to get lots of data sources in here. And one of the visions is that people can actually use their Pawprint, to access low carbon product, services and activities at a lower cost. So we need that. We're going to need it to be verifiable at some point. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it is one of those things that is going to have a evolutionary sort of kind of step change on this sort of thing. So I think, it's going in the right direction. So let's wind back to this Pawprint story. You decide you're going to want to make a difference. You decide that climate change is the angle that you want to take. You do a huge amount of effort. You get yourself in front of Mike Berners-Lee. You go with the carbon footprint approach. And then how are you funding all of this?
So initially I put some savings into it, so which have pretty much run dry, it's worth saying. And then I had a chance conversation with an investor who I've always respected a huge amount. He'd backed a business that was very successful here in Edinburgh, and I was introduced to him. I don't know why at some point. Anyway, I had a chat with him. We were speaking about tennis, as it happens. Tennis is my main sport other than football, and he's a big tennis man. And then he said, he said, what's new with you? And I said, well, I've got this idea, and told him about Pawprint. And then I said, and obviously the elephant in the room is that when the time's right, I'd love you to invest. And I expected him to say, as most investors say, oh yeah, just send me the deck and we'll talk about it, sort of thing. And he just said, I'm in. And I was like, what? Why? How? Sort of thing. And how much? Obviously. and he said, a good amount. And we talked about it. And I said, don't you want to see a business plan? He said, no, that's very old fashioned. I know you, I believe in you, and this product, like, it has to exist. I think you've got as good a shot, if not better than anyone. So I'm in. And when he did that, obviously my confidence levels went from, went through the roof. I was at quite a low, it's worth saying, I was at quite a low ebb there, because the last few years at Lingo haven't been easy for me. And I was like, God, this guy who I have on a pedestal as an investor is saying that he's going to back it with a big amount of money. And then I started speaking to other folk I knew who had connections into investors, and some friends putting in amounts as well. And before I knew it, it got this momentum, and we were up to 50 investors.
So what you did is you kind of, I suppose, went down the angels investors route first, right? Yeah. But to say that you were successful, I think, is an understatement. I mean, am I right in thinking it's about £580,000?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've got an unfair advantage in that I've run a business before, and I've come through sort of entrepreneurial groups and organizations. So, you get to, it's easier to build relationships with people when you're not looking for money. And when you don't even know you might be looking for money one day. But yeah, and then people sort of connected me in randomly. So I'd met someone through business who introduced me to someone else, and this person is obsessed with climate change, and he had introduced me to other people. And as I say, there's that snowball effect when you're, and I think my learning from that might be useful to some people here if they're thinking about setting up their businesses is, if it's something that is, people can tell is like from your heart, that it is like that you're mission driven, that you believe that this is that through doing whatever you want to do, you're going to make the world a better place. That sells a hell of a lot more strongly than I'm going to make you loads of money type thing. In my experience, I think that, heart and soul thing is great, and it's great because that should be quite natural for folk, yeah.
And I think I think you're absolutely right. I think there's two things there kind of to separate them around, the authenticity of the mission, which I think is really, really important. But I think, like you said, because you've kind of had that credibility of doing things with Lingo 24 and making that an incredible success, what advice would you give to people who are literally starting from a cold open, that they haven't got that network yet? What kind of advice would you give to them if they're wanting to launch something in this space as well, for funding?
For funding, yeah. So I think it does change the dynamic, and I think the need for funding and the amount of funding you need changes a little bit depending on the nature of the market you're trying to go into. So Lingo 24 and Pawprint are very different dynamics. With Pawprint, I feel it's a sort of winner takes all market on a country by country basis, maybe on a city by city basis even, and that you've got to move fast and raise a lot of money and build a community. In a translation business, I think it's a very fragmented market. So all of the people on this, and certainly it was when I was setting it up, maybe a little bit less so because of technology. But in a fragmented market, you can set up a business without a huge requirement for capital, and probably the burden is on you more to prove that you can create some value. I don't think when I was a 22-year-old setting up Lingo 24, I didn't want any investment. My dad had been burnt in his career and I just thought I couldn't ever trust investors, like institutional investors. And so that was one of the reasons. But the other reason, if I'm honest, was probably no one would have backed me, because I was just this, 22-year-old. What did I know about the real world? I had nothing behind me other than a degree. I had no business credibility. So I guess to answer your question in fewer words, it's like it's maybe trying to do something smaller initially to build up that credibility, and something that's not a winner takes all market, that's maybe a bit more niche, or where you can carve out a niche without huge amounts of money.
And so what's really interesting when you're talking about investment is, I suppose for most people, the only kind of point of reference that they have, other than maybe popular culture, is Dragon's Den. And so, the person kind of comes in looking really nervous and I've got to remember the numbers. And hi, I'm here and I'm, £100,000 for 1% of my company. And you see all the dragons rolling their eyes when they hear the numbers. So how do you kind of effectively value a company? And how, you talked about your dad being burnt in the past. So going into this with Pawprint, how did you decide how much of the business to give away for how much equity?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So obviously I had that initial conversation with the sort of first investor to come on board, and he gave me an idea. And I had some friends who had set up second businesses, and they that were technology businesses. Caroline Plum from Fluidly and Jack Willie Cohen from What 3 Words, great, amazing people. And the first thing I said to Andrew, and I remember saying that, was so Caroline valued her business at, I think it was 1.5 million or something like that, the first round. And I was like, well, she's done it at that. And to be honest, I consider her to be an amazing person and an A player. So maybe I should just go for $1 million. And he looked at me and he was like, Christian, that's, it's pathetic. Like, come on. You have done something, and you've got ability and whatever. So that was the first mark. And then as I got into more conversations with more investors, and particularly the people who were talking about larger sums, the question came, okay, so would you value the amount that you put in, depending on the valuation? And there was a certain threshold. So we valued the business at £2 million pre-money, which sounds like a crazy amount for something that doesn't even exist. But the view that the investors take is, firstly, they want the founding team to have a lot of skin in the game so that they're aligned to get a return. And secondly, they know that the business doesn't have any intrinsic value. And with Pawprint in particular, it's either going to be, it's either going to grow a lot and become a very valuable business and give a return in the tens of X's or even more, or it's not going to work. And so it's whether it's 2 million or 3 million or 1 million. If we're looking at something that's either going to be worth, let's say, I'm picking numbers out of the air, but it's either going to be worth 0 or 50 million, let's say, then it doesn't actually make that much difference. It's either going to be a very good return or it's going to be a loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you obviously went down the angels route and raised all this amazing money through the angels. So then you went to crowdfunding. So how was that experience, and why did you kind of choose to go down that route and not to continue down the angels route?
So I think we will go back to the angels route, but as I mentioned, I'm trying to build here a movement of people who all want to do their bit about climate change. And I bought some shares in Brewdog. In fact, I'm drinking one of their beers now. I don't know if we've got any Brewdog fans here. Yeah. But they're from the same part of Scotland as me, Aberdeen in the northeast. And I was amazed at what just having a small amount of money, some skin in the game, did in terms of my willingness to forgive them when they did things I didn't agree with, and my willingness to talk to them, talk about them to friends, to go to their bars and all that sort of stuff. And that's one thing. I think the other thing is that democratizing investment, like allowing people who wouldn't normally consider investing in businesses to invest from £10 because they believe in something, or they believe, as a business, or they believe in its purpose, or £100 or whatever is appropriate for people. I really like that idea. Like the fact that you can open this out to groups of people who are far beyond your you know, your own bubble type thing. I love that. And so I think Pawprint's very well suited to having a crowd behind us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you launched Crowdcube how many weeks ago?
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
And so how much were you aiming for?
So it's an interesting one. The target on there is 100 grand. We were hoping that it would go above that.
And what have you got? It's like £150,000.
Yeah, it's gone up. It's gone up even more. I mean, it's. I get emails, you know, every, like, I don't know, few hours with a new investment going in. But the real, so it's. I think it's about. I don't actually know, Natasha. I think it's about 180 grand. But the number that I'm looking at is the number of investors.
Yeah.
Because I really don't want. I don't want people to put in large amounts of money because of the risk for them, and it's all relative. But what I really would love to do is have people's engagement in the movement, and so lots of people putting in £10 is much more important to me. So I'm hoping to get, we've got about, so the number, I think it was 535 investors on there.
So Pete's very conveniently told me, so it's 195,110 from 538 investors.
138, so it's gone up, good. Yeah, so we've got 538. We've got 14 days to go, 2 weeks to go. And I would love it if we could get hundreds more.
And absolutely, I think you guys and girls and they are listening to this and inspired by Christian's work with Pawprint. He has a Crowdcube that is open and you can invest from as little as £10, I believe. Yeah.
And that's, you know, some of my friends have been sort of apologetic for only putting in £10. And I'm like, honestly, like, the fact you've put in £10 is all I wanted. It's really not about large amounts of money. I want to still be friends with everybody who puts money in, you know, irrespective of how this goes. It's about building that sense of a community and a movement. And in Leeds, like, we're really keen to have a strong critical mass of people in Leeds to help us, you know, launch with gusto in your neck of the woods.
So we talk about Leeds here. So you kind of, obviously, we've talked about the product and the evolution of the product. We've talked about funding and whether you've kind of gone through an angels and a crowdfunding model. And then we're starting to get pretty damn close to talking about launching. So how did you choose how to launch it and, you know, which cities to target?
So we've got a fantastic head of marketing who was part of Skyscanner. Ironically enough, two of our top execs were part of quite climate unfriendly businesses in the past, one a flights business and one an oil and gas research consultancy. So
well, they kind of earn those chips now, surely. So that's why, you know.
Yeah, they're racking up the paw points now. So he's got a very limited budget, a lot less than was the case in his Skyscanner days. And he was looking at how you can get most bang for buck from that, and having a concentration in Edinburgh, where we are based, and in another UK city which was eco-minded and easy to reach by train was what we were looking for.
And so Leeds came out, right? And obviously, you know, I'm very biased, but, you know, I think you've chosen the best city in the UK.
I think we have. And the thing is, I think we knew about 25% of the reasons why that's the case before we rocked up. And in terms of we've touched on this, the organisations who are already doing great stuff around climate change, the council, being very open, accessible and supportive, the universities and the researchers there.
Wonderful ODI as well in Leeds at Munro House, who are doing awesome things. Yeah,
and we you know, unfortunately, because of the crisis, we're Zero Waste Leeds, who we're partnering with. Unfortunately, we're at an early stage in a lot of these relationships, but the openness and the buzz is phenomenal. So yeah, really chuffed.
So with the launch, it's going to be Edinburgh and Leeds. And so I guess the $1 million question is, when are you thinking you're going to launch?
So we've got a fixed launch date of the 26th of May. But that's not for everyone. So that will be people who come in on the crowdfunding round, and it'll also be for people who are at the top of our wait list. We've got it's quite a fun thing we're doing, a bit like Monzo did. So if you sign up on our wait list right today, you'd be in position 1,200 or something like that. But the moment that you refer a friend, you jump up, and so it incentivizes us building buzz around what we're doing and rewards people who are, evangelizing. So.
No, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right in Leeds. I mean, we talked about this earlier. We're so incredibly lucky to have such a progressive and approachable council who genuinely want to make bold decisions and create great change for a city that they love. And I think that with the initiatives they've done with things like 100% digital Leeds, through to the Tour de Yorkshire, through to a huge amount of work around diversity in tech, all the way through to obviously a load of environmental things with the clean air work that they're doing, and obviously working with yourselves, it kind of just shows how engaged they are as a council, right?
100%. I mean, we've not scratched the surface, but the responsiveness, how quickly we were introduced by Eve at Leeds Council, and I wish every council was as on it and progressive and stuff. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So the launch is the 26th of May in Leeds, and I guess what we've talked about is you're looking for those local suggestions. So if people invest in Pawprint, can then they submit local initiatives or because I think people like Nicola have asked, how do organisations work to combat climate change, get in touch to work with Pawprint in Leeds?
Yeah, so it's via our website is the easiest way, but also the various different social channels you'd expect we're on, from Twitter to Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. In terms of the localized rollout, one of the other things I didn't mention is the neighbourhoods functionality, and that won't launch until later in the summer, but we'll definitely be looking to populate that then. So be looking for local support on that if anyone's up for it.
Absolutely. And so my final question is going to be about support. One of the things I suppose as a leader I find is that it becomes very lonely at the top, that I don't have a huge amount of people that I can kind of always confide in, because there's few of us, and there's things I can't always confide with my team about if I've had a bad day or if I've had to do something which has been difficult. But I suppose as an entrepreneur, that must be equally quite difficult. How have you kind of managed to cope with that, with the challenges of Pawprint? Have you kind of had mentors, or have you kind of got a support network of other startups that you can kind of confide in and ask for advice on?
Yeah, so I think there are a few people who are really supportive. I mean, obviously my wife is incredibly supportive, and my parents. Then we've got our non-exec who's based in York, actually, not too far away from you guys, who is mentoring me on some things and restraining me sometimes. He's another. I've got multiple restraining influences in my life, Natasha. And then the other one is I'm part of this. It's like a business group. I describe it as it's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for people running businesses. It's not anything to do with alcohol. That's a group that gets together, and so you bare your soul, really. You sort of the stereotype of people running businesses is there's no emotion involved, but I struggle with that. I'm quite an emotional person, and this group gets together, and you share in a very confidential, sort of safe environment what's going on in your life, good and bad, across you individually, your family, your business. And the idea is not to judge and not to give direct advice, but more to share experiences that other folk might learn from. And that network, I've been part of that for about 7 years, and I think it's astonishing how much value you get get from that, because those people are in comparable situations. Like my best mate's a paramedic up in Aberdeen, and he faces different pressures. I mean, at the moment he faces incredible pressure, but these guys are guys and girls are running are running businesses, and all family people, and you know,
it's crazy, isn't it?
It's there's a lot of value to gain from one another, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key thing, is you've got to have, you've got to look at your mental health in this. I've got quite a few friends who've had startups, and it is difficult because, especially when you have staff, there is a lot of pressure on you, whether that be on funding or answering to investors or, you know, taking risks. You know, the weight is on your shoulders, you know. And if I work for a company, you know, there is obviously a huge responsibility as a leader, but ultimately I'm part of a bigger engine. Whilst I suppose in a startup, you know, there is a lot of focus on you, right? And it's about looking after your mental health as well.
I think sorry, Natasha, is my internet access, am I going a bit wobbly? I feel...
Oh, you're okay. Can everyone else see us okay? If you give us a shout in the chat room, everything okay from your sides, everyone? Hope so. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, good. Thank you.
Cool. So sorry, I missed some of that. You were talking about mental health.
Yeah, so I think as a founder, unlike me, where I work for a big company, whilst I have a lot of responsibility for my department, ultimately, you know, if something goes really badly wrong, you know, the company hopefully would support me. But as a startup, I suppose there's a lot more pressure on, you know, getting funding or kind of growing the business to make sure that, you know, it kind of succeeds. So have you kind of had, you know, I suppose it's great that you have that support with communities to make sure that your mental health is kind of well looked after in all of this, so you can switch off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding it with the crowdfunding and the intensity of that, and trying to get the numbers up. I'm finding that very difficult. So, trying to take exercise. I had an accident falling off my bike, which didn't help. The saddle broke off. You know, that I've never seen that happen before. No, I think you know, the sort of modern day leader needs to think carefully about balance, and otherwise you're going to burn out, and you're not going to achieve what you set out to achieve. So it can be counterproductive. So I think ticking all the boxes, you know, trying to build healthy relationships, trying to get exercise, get sleep, not you know, booze enough but not too much type thing. Yeah, easier said than done, but I think that the old sort of 80s style, I'm only going to sleep 4 hours a night type of thing is, I don't think many people are preaching that nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a couple of questions. Amy Young asks, how does Pawprint differ from One Planet Living and WWF calculators that are available?
So I don't know about One Planet Living. The WWF calculator is really just that. It's a calculator, and what we're offering is more focused around behavioural change. So once you've got that number, what are the things that you can do within your community, within your local area, that will make a difference? And then it goes into incentivising that through the Paw Points mechanism, and then in time we'll be having we'll have Pawprint for Business to allow corporates to do their bit, and we'll also be doing all these other things that will allow people to go to actually take action. I guess what maybe the easy way to think about it is that WWF is a sort of initial number. Pawprint is the taking that to a whole new level of action to do something about it.
Absolutely. So Nicola asks, what is Pawprint built with? Are you kind of aware of across the tech spec stuff?
Yeah, so it's Symfony on the back end and React on the front.
Ah, lovely little React. It's very popular nowadays. A great framework, and which isn't an MVC. So, but yes. Nicola, if you have any follow-up questions, give us a shout. Claire Duffield asks, "Foo your do's." Apparently, this is an Aberdeen question.
Aye, nae bad yourself. Chuffing away, ta. I love it. I love the Doric. Yeah.
So Claire says, I still pecking.
Still pecking. I'm nae bad. I'm chuffing away, as I say.
Tanya asks, and this is an interesting question with startup staff. I know I could be doing much more in terms of my car use pre-lockdown days. I don't change my tech often. I'm still rocking iPhone 5S and a 2012 MacBook Air. Will Pawprint still work on an iPhone 5S? Or, sorry, purely selfish question rather than an enlightened one.
Yeah, it will work. What we're launching initially is a PWA, progressive web app. So that is not a native app. So it won't, for example, exist on the iOS App Store. It will exist in Google Play. But you'll be able to use it through a browser, and you'll be able to have Bjorn's face looking up at you from your phone as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. And Lisa asks, Pawprint is a great forward-thinking concept. Apart from financial help as an individual, what else can we do?
Apart from financial, oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you what the major thing is spreading the word. We want to get, and whether that's, you have some friends who might like the odd punt from an investment point of view. You have some friends who would never do that, but care about this topic. And it's about getting the word out, and get, like Natasha has built up a great community, and it's really kind of her to give me this platform and give Pawprint this platform. And we need to be doing more stuff like that. We need to move fast, communicate with people, listen to their concerns, and adapt. And I think what we'll do after we've closed the crowdfunding round is set up a sort of online forum where people can engage on different topics. I mean, our team are under pressure. They're a really good team, but they are having to work really hard, writing all these challenges, building the code, preparing the marketing and stuff. So. Yeah, so there may be support there as well, although that's sometimes difficult to manage. But just being part of it, I think the advocacy stuff is probably the single thing that we would really love your support with. So that's a really nice question. Thank you.
So Catherine asks, how many questions are there in the calculator?
So the calculator it depends a little bit on how you answer some of them. So if, for example, you say that you are vegan, you will have fewer questions than if you say you have meat and dairy, because we need to go into the detail of what that is. But I think it's roughly 20. Should take you 2 to 3 minutes to do the basic number, and then you can go in and answer more if you want to get more precise about what your Pawprint is.
Brilliant. And then my final question is from Alexandra, who says, I work with a charity called Renewable World. Are you partnering with any charities for options to reduce Pawprint? Yeah,
definitely. So as people earn their paw points, they'll be able to assign them to different charities who are doing stuff that's climate friendly. So I'd love to partner with your organisation on that. In time, we'll turn that into a sort of store where people are not just backing a charity, but they're backing specific activities, whether that's community activities or tree planting or whatever it may be. So yeah, definitely want to build lasting, win-win partnerships there. Yeah,
absolutely. We've got the lovely Nicola who has said the Permaculture Association would love to work with you. So this is brilliant. That I think, going back to the earlier question, getting word out that Pawprint is coming to Leeds, and Christian and his gang would love to hear about community initiatives which can help support people bring down their scores, right?
Yeah, definitely. And do other stuff that's climate friendly. Like the guys at Zero Waste Leeds. I don't know, Natasha, do you know Rob Greenland there?
I'm afraid not, but I'm very familiar with Zero Waste Leeds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been riveted. Sounds really sad, but I've been riveted by their composting content on Facebook during lockdown, and yeah. So it's stuff that is like, I think about this as being a big campaign akin to a war, and it's about folk coming together who are all broadly trying to do their bit, and so the CO2e number is the main number, and that's why it's our focus. But there are other things that we need to work on that are about sort of re-architecting mankind's relationship with our planet. Moving from being you know, feeling like we own it and can plunder it, to being just guardians. That's looking after it for, you know, for the generations to come.
I've got a couple of quick ones. So Leanne says, are there any tips, thoughts on the carbon footprint of my job? I do all I can at home to reduce carbon footprint and reduce waste, but one business trip negates all my personal efforts. Before COVID-19, I was supposed to go to the US 3 times for work. It makes my efforts feel futile. Is it just accept it or get a job that aligns with these values?
Right, brilliant question. We are launching, and I wrote the presentation, the first presentation for it today, Pawprint for Business. And Pawprint for Business will allow you to look at the things that affect your carbon footprint that are associated with work, whether that's commuting into work or travel for work, whether it's the dietary options that are available there, the sourcing policies. And we're going to be working with sustainability managers and directors of businesses, big businesses to start with, but all businesses in time, to help understand those key data points so businesses can do more, and that those businesses can then make themselves more attractive to their workforce, you know, just move faster on this. So what Pawprint for Business, it's going to allow people to sign up on behalf of their company, even without company permission, and start creating a bit of a movement in the company, a bit of a agitation for change. And then we'll sell a solution into those businesses to get the data, the insights, the sentiment to help them do their bit as well. So we're going to, you know, we're definitely going to be agents of change for corporates as well.
Brilliant. And hopefully that was a separate question somebody else had asked about for Pawprint for Business as well. And the wonderful Sharon has said that she'd love to share your concept on IVE. We're a social enterprise working with young people, tackling climate action. Let's work together. So it feels like there's some incredible connections that you're going to get out of this, Christian, as well. And Tanya mentions also the Digital Production Partnership is a business that have a sustainability for media organisations, which is quite topical, with obviously Channel 4 coming to Leeds, and Sky, the company that I work at, is also have a big office in Leeds too, with ITV around the corner. So again, that's probably a really nice tie-in as well.
It's amazing. You'd almost think that this was around climate change, like your group was a climate change group with the number of people who've got connections.
I think that's the thing, is I think it goes back to the mission stuff as well that you were saying, that people are so engaged in this. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Christian. If you give him some cheer in the chat window, if you do your clicks, but you know, absolutely.
I think, Natasha, the credits to you. Like, you've made this happen, and you're an amazing host. So thank you.
Oh, why, thank you. So if you have loved listening to Christian's journey with Pawprint, as Christian has said, we can support it and put in a minimum of a £10 donation to crowdcube.com/pawprint. And it's going to be absolutely fascinating, as Mary says, to see what happens and to follow this journey with you, to see this go to fruition. 26th of May that it's going to be live. It's really exciting that it's going to be in Leeds as well. It's just such a big tech scene, and so many of us who are so passionate about making a difference with carbon offsetting, but also by doing it in a community-led thing, which is so important in Leeds, because it's probably best to say that Leeds is like one big village. We love our indie. We have the most amazing Leeds indie food scene, but it is all about supporting our local independence, and being able to do that whilst carbon offsetting feels like such a win-win of supporting some amazing social enterprises and community groups in the process.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Like, thanks for an amazingly warm welcome. Really.
Brilliant. So we are going to be back in 2 weeks' time with another event. All of our events are on our meetup page. And then in a fortnight's time, we've got Olu, and another 2 weeks after that, in 4 weeks' time, we have an incredible talker, Kathy Pearl, joining us from Google in California, and she is the director of conversational design there, who is going to be talking to us about everything you wanted to know about conversational design and you were afraid to ask, with all the work she does with Google Home. Join our meetup page so you don't miss on any of our events. A huge thank you to Christian again. If you've enjoyed tonight, send us a bit of love on Twitter. Our hashtag is EmpowerWithTech. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, Natasha.